And there is a special anointed rhythm that I've created, and he's inviting us in. And I think as the Gentiles start to observe the rhythm, and as the Jews start to see the Messiah in the rhythm, I think there will be a oneness of God's people in preparation for him coming back.
Hey friends, welcome to the 1000 Houses podcast, where we encourage and equip households to make disciples in and through the home. Every episode you'll hear interviews, teachings, and conversations around what it looks like to turn your home into a hub for mission, community, and discipleship. If you'd like to learn more about what entering into a season of coaching might look like for you and your household, visit 1kh.org for more info. Let's jump into today's episode.
I'm really excited to introduce Mark and Michelle, Team Tiderman. We have known Mark and Michelle for as long as we've been married. It's like right after we got married, we joined a small group with you guys, and we are so honored to know you. And we're excited to hear how these annual holidays have been a blessing to your family. So they're going to give a quick introduction, and then we're going to do our top 10 list for our top 10 tips for these holidays.
Thank you. It's hard to follow the most attractive couple in the world. No, we love you. It was such an honor when you called. It's been such a cool journey of learning these feasts, knowing even 18 years ago, being in small group over at North Star and just having so many parallel journeys and how God weaves together stories, the way Jeremy and April have influenced our life and you guys. So it's a cool thing. So.
All right, this is our team. Just to introduce you, I'm Michelle, and this is Mark. And we have 4 kids, Marcos, Isaac, Selah, and Mercy. And just to kind of share our journey, this is all like relative dates, kind of remember. But in the very beginning of our church community, people started celebrating Passover, and we hopped onto that pretty quickly and have been doing it about since 2012, maybe a little earlier, and it became just a staple of our year. And it wasn't until much later that we went to the Priors for a Sukkot, and we got the vision for that. And I think actually we maybe went to their house on a Thursday and came home and said, I think we could pull this off on Saturday, and invited some people and just kind of dove into our first version of hosting a Sukkot gathering. So that's been a cornerstone of our year for the last few years. And then this last year we added in the Feast of Trumpets for the first time. So we're kind of have eased our way into celebrating these festivals.
Yeah, we're kind of like, I should say, I'm kind of person that kind of misses a lot of the fundamental things, but goes all in and gets a little crazy. So it's kind of, I think our story will be a bit, maybe the complement, the opposite of what these guys, we actually have not adopted all the feasts. We started, like we said, with Passover, and then we kind of went to the other end of the bookend of Sukkot. And as I remember going to to the Sukkot gathering, and I remember talking with April and Jeremy on their porch, and she was talking about the magic, I was telling her that it felt like Christmas, just felt like all my childhood desires wrapped up into this festival. And she was like, well, some say that Sukkot feels like Christmas. Well, we say that Christmas feels like Sukkot, and I was like, what the heck does that mean? And I started to really desire for more. And I went home and I remember reading, and I started pressing into Leviticus 23. I ended up reading a book by Booker called Celebrating Jesus in the Feasts, in the Biblical Feasts. And it opened up my eyes. And, I had year after year, we would do this Seder meal, this Passover meal, and it felt like the culmination of my faith. It felt like this annual rhythm of me getting formed into a son of the Father and into a follower of Jesus. I felt like solidarity with him. And I remember when I got introduced to Sukkot, it was almost like Jesus was seen as his sacrifice in the Passover, but then his like whole life, all of life that's available to you was meant to be like kind of seen in Sukkot. And so I came up with this, this is a visual that came from that book. And I just want you guys to kind of see this. This kind of changed my life and my perspective, where he said that there's essentially 3 journeys over the course of the year. And Brent and Katie talked about that the spring festivals essentially were Passover, unleavened bread and first fruits, and then Pentecost. And he framed it in this book as you get peace in the first 3. You get peace over the Passover season. You get peace with God. And so that ultimately is what the sacrifice was for. On Pentecost, you get the power of God. And then on Sukkot, you get the rest of God. And he framed it and he said, this is actually the journey of the Christian. If you think of someone when they are actually progressing, they meet Christ, they encounter him, they get peace with him. And then they, over time, they experience and get the Holy Spirit, and now they have power available to them. And then ultimately, over the course of your life, you learn how to rest in God to the culmination of being one with him. And then it's also this like redemptive narrative. And so what's fascinating is these 7 feasts, they essentially unlock an annual rhythm of forming this into us, into our year. And I don't know about you, but like I have formative, we were talking earlier, formative memories, core memories that come from the annual rhythms of growing up. If you think about your holidays, as we shared earlier. And so these, I think these have tremendous power. And for someone, I actually have ADHD. And so it's easy for me to forget, like, what are we doing here? What the heck are we doing here? Why are we like the same week after week? Kind of feel like you're on a treadmill. And then this annual rhythm kind of activates for me that like, oh, it's the Feast of Trumpets coming up. Jesus is actually coming back someday. In the midst of all of this, the King is coming. Oh, it's the Day of Atonement coming. Like this sin will ultimately be ridded from my life and from the world someday. There will be complete cleansing of the earth. Oh, Sukkot is coming. Like I feel exhausted right now, but there is hope. Like he is actually coming. There's a wedding coming where the groom is coming for the bride. And so this beautiful reminder, annual, was not just an annual rhythm for us, but it actually got to form in us. What does it mean to ultimately be a Christian? So that kind of awakened this discovery. And so I started studying and searching and really getting just every guy around town that I would sit and talk with Jeremy for hours and hours and read and study. And we ended up coming up with this festival. We kind of framed this, we called it Signpost. And so because have you ever been on the Appalachian Trail? And so Appalachian Trail, I hiked it when I was in college, not the whole thing. But you get to a point where you're just like, I can't go any further. Remember a couple years ago, Jeremy and I were like, we were on a hike, and it's like you hit these moments where you're like, I can't go any further. I'm exhausted. I don't know where I'm going. What the heck? And then you reach a signpost. And a signpost isn't the end. It isn't the finish. But it's saying, hey, there's water coming. Hey, your destination, your camp is coming. Don't give up. It's right up the road. Keep coming. It's another half mile, quarter mile. And so Signpost was ultimately this culminating party that we felt like God was calling us to create, essentially, is the last day of the great feast. And so we tried to adopt, we did, over each year, we got a little bit more advanced. First year, we built a sukkah. Or first year, we didn't even build a sukkah. We just literally had a party. Second year, as you can kind of see here, we built this just simple little, it's not Rick Meyer Brothers build level, but it's like, it's up here. It's like, it's just really simple. But you'll notice a lot of the imagery, what we found is it actually looked like a wedding. Like we even had this arch we built this archway last year because we wanted to we were captured by the symbolism of a wedding. And to me, it's fascinating that there's the holidays, like you said, they're holidays that we're celebrating that haven't happened yet. In one way they have. The Feast of Tabernacles in particular points back to when God dwelled with his people in the wilderness. But it's pointing to a day that hasn't happened yet, which is kind of mind-blowing. So this is our community. We're up in North in Fairfield. We've got Red Door community that we've really pulled in is a church that we're a part of. And we've brought a lot of people in, but it's pretty neat too. We brought a lot of high schoolers in one night. I don't know if you can see this. This is my favorite thing. That how Sukkot is kind of for everybody. This kid's got an I Heart Hot Mom shirt on, hanging out at the Sukkot festival. So it's like, it's definitely, it's for everybody. It's really, if you read the scriptures, this is actually one of our favorite kids. His name's Gabe. And anything else I need to say?
I think we'll get into more.
All right, okay. And here's a couple more pictures you can kind of see of our kids here. Their favorite night of the year is on the Feast of Trumpets and Sukkot because they get to get on the roof. This is our daughter with our shofar, daughter Selah. And so she's blowing the trumpet last year. And to me, the Feast of Trumpets was the one I came to last year. We kind of revealed and studied deeply last year. It blew my mind. Like, I'm a man. My name means war. Mark means warrior. Like, I'm a intense individual. And so, like, knowing that actually, that the king is actually coming back is really important to me. Like, there's a day of war coming. And it's like that activates, it just, every year I forget that. And then it's so awesome to have a holy day that reminds me of that. This is our kids helping us build our sukkah. And so Michelle has this big white or like paper, big sign that she has the kids color out that says, "This is not our home." All right, you're rushing me along. It's because we're not as Pinteresty as a. Go ahead, please share.
Okay, well, I think we'll share more later, but these are just pictures.
We won't share more later, so talk about you have 2 more minutes.
The way that I feel like, have embodied this is just inviting our community into it, as Mark has said. And so we cook steak and chicken for like 100 people, and then people bring sides, and it's like a wedding feast in our backyard. Actually, I was looking through our Google Photos and clicked in wedding, and it brought up pictures of our Sukkot gathering. So it's been a really just huge blessing to us and to our community, and hopefully multiplying the vision of what this looks like, and hopefully encouraging others to kind of grab onto it as well.
Yeah, I think that wedding concept should not be lost on us. Like the seventh, like if you look in Leviticus 23 and you search for the word 7, it shows up 18 times. Leviticus 23, it's all 7. I mean, it's like the 7th day of the week, the 7th day, 7 weeks, the 7th day. And then it's these 7 festivals. And so Sukkot is like the culmination of culmination. 7 is completion. And so it's pointing to the day when everything, all your deepest desires, all your longings are completely fulfilled. Because the king is coming, and there will be a day where he's actually gone to war, rid the world of sin, and now is dwelling with his bride. And that's you. And so we literally get to rehearse this every single year. So the symbolism of the wedding, I think, is something that we've really tried to embrace. So thanks. I get a little fired up.
All right. So now, we're going to do top 10 tips for celebrating biblical holidays. So like Joe said, you might feel a little overwhelmed, and this is meant to make it a little bit easier. So we'll go through these. All right.
Okay, so this one is start small, and it's kind of twofold. One, it's totally okay if you're like, I cannot add 7 holidays to my year. That feels crazy. And it's totally fine, like we said multiple times, if you choose not to ever add all 7, if you pick 1 or whatever. But if you eventually want to add more, it's a good idea to just start with 1 a year and go kind of slowly into it. That feels a lot less overwhelming. And then the second part of this is it doesn't have to be elaborate. Like when you start a new holiday, don't feel like I need to have the entire plan and it's going to be a full day. If you decide to do Sukkot first and you're like, our only goal is to just be outside and have fun food and drinks, like that's okay. Like you can start with baby steps like that and add to it. In addition to adding to it, you can expect to modify it. And this is something that we have definitely experienced over the years. There's some things we've tried and we're like, that totally did not connect. That did not work. And we're scrapping that. Or I think we could tweak this the next year. Like kind of at the end of each year, we have a little debrief after the holiday. And it's like, what worked, what didn't, what should we remember for next year? And also as your kids grow, there's going to be some things that they think are really fun when they're 5 that they're going to totally roll their eyes at when they're 15. And so keep that in mind. Like it may modify as your kids understand more or as they get older.
Our tip 2 is defend the rhythm. And this just means to do whatever you can to keep the rhythm no matter what. So even if it's scaling back 1 year, if you have a busy season, even if it's having one meal outside and not every night that week, we just really believe that whatever we do to defend the rhythm keeps this going in our family. So lowering our expectations, increasing our anticipation, not trying to do it perfectly, and just continuing to have that long vision of what we keep repeating to whatever scale it can be that year will impact the generations to come and will form us and form our kids in this story.
Wait, go back. Yeah, playing the long game is huge. It's like you guys were sharing. I love that you talked about like ABCs for a few years, and then it's literally like the essence of the holiday coming out. And that's like, if you've ever read the book Atomic Habits, or there's this concept of like, it's these slow gains. And it's like, over time, you don't even see the progress that you make if you stay the course. We overestimate what we can do in a week and underestimate what we can do in a year or 10 years. And what's happening is these rhythms, the weekly rhythm and the annual rhythm, they form us. And so it's like when you don't pay attention to it, you don't realize it's actually permeating some of these things.
Yeah, so Joe, you mentioned something about what do you do when you have crying kids? And that is a real struggle. Yeah, you hold them, right, apparently. And so expect distractions. Like that's going to happen, especially because we don't do these alone. So we don't have just our kids. We've got a lot of other families' kids with us. And so I think the biggest key is to just talk loud, stay on task, even if all chaos is breaking loose around you.
Don't expect to get everybody's attention.
That's right. And just hope, okay, next year we're going to do this again. And so if you get, 30% of it this year and another 10% next year, whatever, like this is a long game. We're going to build on this each year. And so, some tips are just really be animated. Try to, get on the kids' level, try to engage the kids, ask them questions, do whatever you can to keep their attention, because it is a mix of we're going to do some games and we're going to do some activities that are fun and you're going to get some energy out. And then there's going to be some times where you have to sit and listen for 10 minutes, And so during those times, there will be just times where you've got to just kind of try as best as you can to keep their attention, but don't expect perfection.
I should have included some pictures. I had some where it's like Brent standing up there like preaching and nobody's looking at him. That happens. Yeah.
Okay, celebrate with others. And we've touched on this by just inviting other families into this. And that could be one family that you want to link arms with. Everything feels easier when you have someone else to do it with. It could be inviting your whole community in. It could be inviting a couple families. But we just find that the energy of having people around it, sharing the stories together, hearing people's hearts, it all just makes it such a rich environment. So again, we use these to tell the story of the kingdom, and that can be to our neighbors who don't know Jesus. We've had neighbors over. It could be to remind our Christian community of the stories and of the reality to come. And then just really praying about who God wants there. With Sukkot, we have like 100 people and we have a huge invitation. But for our Passover meal, every year we do it, invite a different group of people. So we pray, God, who do you want at our Passover table this year? And we've had neighbors and family and different friend groups, but we choose a different group of people each year depending on who God puts on our hearts. And this, I would say, just, you asked about crying kids. We more say, what do we do with grumpy teenagers? And this actually has been a really big win because we find the more friends that are around, the more people we're including, the more easier it can be to get kids on board who might be a little hesitant otherwise.
Can you talk about how each night of the week?
Yeah, with Sukkot too, we have our big party at the end of the week, but throughout the week we have smaller gatherings, and I know people do this differently, but we try to invite maybe one family over for each night of the week that we can share a smaller, more intimate dinner with.
Okay, so tip number 5 is make it magical. We really want these holidays to be like the highlights of the year, like their peak joy is associated with these spiritual holidays. So a great way to like start thinking like when you're planning your activities and what you actually want to do on the day is to borrow concepts from other holidays. So we started thinking like, what do our kids love about some of these big popular holidays like birthdays and Christmas and Easter? And it was a pretty obvious short list of like fun food and drinks. They like prizes and games. They like things that we only do it this time of year, like it feels really special, or things that it's like, we do this every year. It's very nostalgic to them. Another thing is like they love being with their cousins. Like those are their favorite people right now. So we always invite over extended family. So you definitely want to incorporate some of these, but just make sure you're tying whatever these fun things are back to the meaning of what the holiday is about.
Yeah, and I think there's this passage in Deuteronomy 14 that talks about a tithe related to these biblical holidays that I feel like we would be remiss not to mention. And so this is from Deuteronomy 14. Are you talking about this later? Okay. So in Deuteronomy 14, it says, "You may sell the tithe portion of your crops and herds, put the money in a pouch, and go to the place your Lord, your God, has chosen. When you arrive, you may use the money to buy any kind of food you want, cattle, sheep, goats, wine, or other alcoholic drinks. Then feast there in the presence of the Lord your God and celebrate with your household." And so this is a little spoken on. I see surprised faces. This is not a passage on tithes that we hear very much, but this is this God of abundance who's saying, hey, when you go out, like this is what we talk about at Sukkot. We want this to be magical and memorable, and so we take this verse literally, and we're like, hey, we're going to tithe to ourselves this week. We're going to spend, like you said, a bunch of money on food and drinks, and we're going to celebrate because God is a God of abundance and a God of goodness. And specifically with Sukkot, because, the spring festivals are great. They represent the gospel where Jesus came to save us from our sins, but those are a means to an end. And then we talk about Shavuot, Pentecost, when we get the Holy Spirit, and that's an important, powerful part of the story, but it's a means to an end. And then there's Jesus returns and the cleansing of the earth, and that's all great. But like the end is what we celebrate at Sukkot, when we get to dwell with God forever. So this is our biggest party. This is where we make it the most magical, and we just want to really like make it a core memory.
So good. Can I add to that? Yeah. What you're getting at there is the essence of God's heart. And so many people miss God's heart. We see the rules, and we don't realize that God actually has so much in store. It's that C.S. Lewis quote that says, like, we're like kids settling for mud pies when a holiday at the sea awaits. God has immeasurably more than we could ever imagine. But we're so used to models, and so it's just these little glimpses. And that's why it's not like every day. He's not saying do this all the time. It's actually most of Scripture is saying don't do this all the time. But there's this glimpse of his kingdom. And one specific thing that we found of making it magical is music, and very specific music. So both on our Shabbat and on Sukkot and our Seder meal, our Passover meal, we have a like holy playlist. It's like only allowed in that time. And we found last year it was kind of funny. We didn't do this on purpose last year with Sukkot, but Corey Asbury's album Pioneer, have you ever heard of this? Highly recommend it. But my kids started playing it. He came out and we started playing it over Sukkot. So literally all day, every day for 7 days. We played it. And Sukkot was over, and one of my kids turned it on, and I was like, you can't play that anymore. And they were like, no, like, that's our playlist. And I was like, it's holy. We're gonna, and what I didn't mean holy as in like, I meant it's gonna be set apart. And I think that's important. That's what creates a bit of a longing, is when you actually withhold certain things that are good, and so you build that pattern. So now our kids listen to Pioneer on Shabbat nights as they go to bed. And it's like the longing, it's this couple of songs that just create this longing for the land to come.
All right, tip 6 is make it a team effort. Include your kids in the planning, preparation, execution, and leading. So this looks very differently depending on the age, but every age kid can do something to contribute. And I love, for our Passover meal, we all know that that whole day we're working together to clean and cook and set the table and prepare for our guests. And it's just so fun to give everyone jobs from, 2-year-olds can put hard-boiled eggs on the plates, or when they get older, when they start helping cook and clean. And it's honestly a highlight is that day that we all come together to make this happen. And same with Sukkot. I mean, it's actually really hard to pull off if it's the mom and dad doing the work. And I'm sure most people in this room have a heart for integrating our kids, and this is a great opportunity for them to be a part of it, to take ownership. We even try to encourage them to lead parts of it, to really make it not our thing, but our family's mission and celebration.
Okay, tip 7 is think of your grandkids. And actually, if you jump to the next slide, there's a little video that I want you guys to watch.
Salut papa. Joyeux Noël.
À Noël, offre bien plus que de la technologie. Vivez un Noël inoubliable avec Bouygues Télécom.
Okay, so that communicates in 90 seconds in a few words in another language better than what I could have communicated in English. But it's this idea that when you create these rhythms, it goes through, it has a life of its own where your kids at first were too young for it, they don't really have a concept of what you're doing. And then they start to really embrace it and think it's awesome. And then they get to maybe the teenage years and they start to think it's a little cool, they're too cool. But then when you can think of your grandkids and these are traditions that can be adopted for future generations. And you see that at the end when he's doing it with the next generation, it's like, oh, I get goosebumps, So I just think that's one of the most exciting things about this holiday for me is thinking about the impact that I have not only on my kids, but generations to come.
Keep talking about that. It's that's the essence, right? It's I think there's a classic leadership quote that says, just when you get tired of saying it, they're just starting to hear it. Okay, so this is, you guys. This is actually, it's kind of a really cool, this picture is really cool for us, by the way, is last year at the Feast of Trumpets, they announced that they were having their next child. So that was kind of cool, announcement. So that was beautiful. But this one is tip number 8, choose unity over division. Really because, that picture doesn't really fit the title, by the way, but it's just the idea that these holidays and celebrating them can be divisive. And so, you guys share in you said you start every holiday with that verse is brilliant. I'm going to steal that because this is actually, we've seen it even in the city with really strong, incredible fathers. There's some really good conversations that we have on a little WhatsApp chat. And there's some good solid back and forth about should everybody celebrate these holidays and should they do it in this way? And Michael and I were just saying earlier is I feel the more, as I've gotten into these holidays, it's almost once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so it's really easy to think, oh, well, this is just the way. This is the only way it has to be. And so I just want to encourage you that these are ultimately meant to create unity. I think they're meant to create unity. And what I think is fascinating, in Leviticus 23, God doesn't say these are the Jewish feasts. He says these are the feasts of the Lord. He said these are my feasts. And so it's meant to be a unifying experience. And I think one of you mentioned this earlier, is if think about it as my kids and there are other kids on our street, they don't have to do the things that they don't have to clean up their room. They don't have to have a team meeting. They don't have to do all the annoying Team Tiderman things that I make them do. But my kids, hopefully they get the vision that they don't have to do these things. They get to do these things. And so it's easy to think we have to do these things to become God's people. And I think but that's not true. We get to do these things because we are God's people. It is an invitation. And anytime you share about it, hopefully you start to believe in it, and maybe you don't, but treat it more as a pull instead of a push. If you are sharing it, invite people in. Kind of when you invite people in, it's happened to us. You experience it, and you're like, that was different. And potentially it connects with my heart. And the last thing I would say is, and this is a personal preference, but it came from another book that I read, but I think that the feasts themselves will actually be used as a unifying rhythm for all of God's people to come together. And here, track with me for a second. So for thousands of years, the Jewish people have been celebrating these feasts without the person of Jesus. They've been celebrating the rhythm of the feast without the person of Jesus. And now for thousands of years, Christians have been celebrating the person of Jesus without the rhythm of the feast. And now I think there's an awakening happening across the Gentiles, us. And if you're sensing a pull, even tonight, I think that the Lord is doing a move. It's a Kairos season on the earth where he's gathering people, pouring out his spirit. And there's a move of saying, these are special times. And there is a special anointed rhythm that I've created, and he's inviting us in. And I think as we as the Gentiles start to observe the rhythm, and as the Jews start to see the Messiah in the rhythm, I think there will be a oneness of God's people in preparation for him coming back.
All right, tip number 9, be a doer. And this is one I want to take delicately because I really don't want this to feel like a burden. This shouldn't be, if you're going out of this feeling burdened, that's not what this is meant to be, okay? But this is just good practical advice for any area of your life. If you are in a position where you're like, I see some benefit here, there is, as humans, there's a propensity for us to be like, I like that, but it requires a lot of effort, and that's just hard. And so we've gotten the comment a lot, that's really cool that you do that, but I just don't know if I, I see the vision, I see the benefit, but I just don't know if I have the effort to be a doer. And I think I've encountered so many people that are like, that would be great to be a part of somebody else doing it if somebody else were to lead it. But I think it's just important to have people who are willing to be like, all right, we're going to do this for our family. We're going to take this action. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be beautiful. There's going to be some flaws and some things that we're going to have to change, but we're going to choose to take action.
Because there's so many people that want to be invited in. If you're willing to be one of the doers, that's a gift to a lot of people in your community too.
Yeah, we would say after hosting 100 people, we'd love for someone else to do stuff and take some people too. Looking at you guys.
Tip number 10, make it a signpost. And you already heard me share the purpose of a signpost. But imagine your gathering gets to be a glimpse of heaven on earth. You get to be that picture that not only people get to encounter the already kingdom that's here, but you give them hope that the not yet kingdom is actually on the way, and we're close to it. So, these feasts are not the end goal. They are meant to point to Jesus. They should stir you to worshiping Jesus, and you should see these feasts in the New Testament, all throughout the Old Testament. It's fascinating when you start pulling it back. You see that Solomon dedicated the temple, and he had this 8-day feast in the Old Testament. Well, it just turns out that he did that on Sukkot. Nehemiah, they lost the book of the word, right? And then they found it, and then they had this big 8-day feast, and did it for another week. What festival you think that was on? Sukkot. It literally happens on Sukkot. Zechariah 14 is this huge prophecy of one day, all the Gentiles are going to observe Sukkot together. It's pointing to a day when us, Gentiles like us, are coming and observing this feast, and where there will be no Jew or Gentile in God's family anymore. There won't be holy and unholy. It'll all be the Lord's. And so all of Scripture, and then last one I want to throw in there, John 7. when you hear Jesus, he actually gets up, and in John 7, he says, I'm living water. He says, anyone who comes to me will never thirst. Well, he says it on the last day of the great feast. John 7, he's standing up on Sukkot, and he is saying, this whole culmination, 7 of 7, points to me. I'm the completion. So, and the last thing I want to say here is that the thing over and over again that really fired me up with observing the Seder on Passover was this toast. And so there was a toast that was said by the Jews, the people of Israel, when they believed that actually next year there was a chance that they would be back in their homeland, that they would be feasting again. They would be toasting, but they would be back in Jerusalem. And so they would end the meal, and this might be a rumor, I don't know how good my research is, but they would raise the final glass, the final toast, and you would say, next year, before we say this, pick up a glass. So look, next year, you would literally look around, next year, and they would say, next year in the New Jerusalem, all right? And it's a celebration. You're literally saying, this same feast, the Passover feast we're celebrating now, there's a chance that we're going to be in our homeland next year. And when I heard that, it gave me goosebumps. It's like, wow, like that's what my brain needs. I just zone out. Again, I'm on this like never-ending like treadmill, like none of this is going anywhere, but actually there's a chance that next year this actually might happen in the New Jerusalem. And then when I started to study about Sukkot, they actually use that same quote somehow in Sukkot. And so this rhythm of starting our year and ending our year with this concept that actually all the things we're celebrating that are faith, that we don't really know if they're real, we know they're real. But at the same time, we're like, man, I really wish I could see Jesus. And maybe that's going to happen next year. Maybe he's coming back. So raise a glass with me. Next year in the New Jerusalem. Cheers.
All right. So that's our top 10. That's our 10 tips. If you guys have any questions, we'd be happy to answer any questions. Yes.
Any recommendations on a first feast to get started with if you haven't done it?
Yeah. I would say that if I'm speaking of annual feasts, I would say probably Sukkot is the best place to start. That's the place I would recommend. Our first was Passover, and Passover was good, but Sukkot, like I said, it's kind of like this is the end that we're all aiming for, was one day when we will dwell forever with God. It's also, like I said, it's our kids' favorite. You can do it with little effort because you can really just be like, hey, we're just going to be outside, get all those toys out of the garage and just let them be all over the yard for the next week, and get some fun drinks and some fun food, and just say like a couple intentional things before dinner. And so I think that is a pretty good place to start. I don't know. 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
This may be wanting you to do it for me. But does anybody have any sort of organizational checklist of like, oh, this is coming up here, so we need to start planning for it here, and there's these crafts, and there's this
2 minutes just to repeat the question.
Sort of
in the mic.
list out there?
Okay. Yeah, so the question is there some sort of list out there that like a resource that allows us to kind of have the calendar and then what to do ahead of time? I would say that resource probably does exist. I don't know, Jeremy, if you have something like that. What we usually do is we just do a quick Google search because it's not on our calendar. So like Google, when is this biblical holiday? And then through the benefit of having done these for a few years, they become a lot easier, So like we don't have to, like the pivots are real simple. The getting something established, getting the ball moving is the hard part. So that's why we recommend doing one a year. And then, once you decide for your family what kind of traditions and what kind of games and activities you want for that holiday, then the next time that comes around, it really doesn't take a whole lot of advanced prep. So it gets easier as you go. So that's what I would say. There probably is a better resource than I have been. Yeah.
Jeremy, your homeland strict? Yeah, we have a Sukkot starter kit. Yeah. The Lord will remind me to get some of the email to you guys. So big recipe to do that.
Yeah.
I use that like every page, and I share it with everybody who comes. It's like very simple and breaks it down, so highly recommend starting.
So it seems like a lot of the festivals fall around two major dates, right? Like a lot in March and a lot in September. So how do you guys, like, given that it's really clustered, right? If it was like Christmas, Easter, New Year's,
Yes.
July, we're all in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So how do you guys do that and make it fun and keep it entertaining, knowing it's like festival, 8 days later, another festival, another festival?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, you have to have buy-in that these are not just worth it. Like, it's not just like, oh, we got to get through this, but like we find enjoyment out of them. So you have to like believe that these are fun, you know? And they do take work, but it's work that's worth it, you know, like going on vacation or whatever. It's never super easy, but like you get there and you're like, okay, this is worth it. And so once you have that buy-in, then I think that does set you up for like, oh, we're going into the festival season, but this is good. We've been looking forward to this. This is a tool that's coming up that we're going to use to train our kids. And so once you have that belief, then you just kind of are like, well, we've got to get our act together and get planning and doing this thing. But like we said, the first 3 festivals are all combined. That makes that simpler. Then that 50 days leading up to Shavuot is enough to recharge. And so then really, it's those fall festivals that all fall within like a 2-week period that are maybe the most work. But we leave Sukkot feeling rested, I would say. Sukkot is one where it is a kind of a restful holiday. There's not as much preparation. Honestly, we don't really have a script or activities or games. It's just let's be outside and you know, enjoy community with other people that come in. So it is one of those things that when you look at it on paper, you're like, wow, that's a lot of effort. But as you actually get into it, you're like, this isn't quite so bad.
And the only thing I would add is totally echoing what Brent said before, where it's like the first year, the setup is like a lot of thinking and planning, and it becomes so much easier kind of once you get into this rhythm where it's like, we have a bin called the Biblical Holidays bin, and it's like when one's coming up, it's like, all right, here's the bin, and it's got our Passover handcuffs in it. It's got a bunch of extra colored powder in it, and it's got the rolled up banner. And so it's like all of our supplies are there, and we're like looking, we're like, what do we need to reorder this year? So once you have these things down, it becomes a lot like. It used to take us like when we were doing a new one, we maybe start a month before and like, let's study it. Let's figure out what we want to do. And we give ourselves plenty of leeway. Now it's like the week before it's like, check the bin and let's get our stuff together, or we need to grocery shop or whatever. But it's so much easier once you start like really going with it.
Yes.
So for your feast at Sukkot, when you have like a group of people at your house, when that first happened, did you invite them all like, did they know what they were getting into, or do you kind of like blindside them a little bit? I mean, we don't have a huge group of people in our life that would be all like, oh, Sukkot, yeah, like, but we have a huge group that would come to a party at our house. So I just wondered how you trained it and how you got that many people in.
So we actually, this is the invite that we sent out. But this is kind of how we framed it. We said, join us for a memorable night of fellowship, food, strong drink, fun, fire, and storytelling of the land that is to come.
Oh, yeah.
And so that kind of framed it for us, which we did do. We did do like a fire time at the end where we kind of at 9 p.m. we'll be like, okay, it's official, and then we kind of open the mic, open the floor to just talk about like just celebrating God, and looking forward. So, but it is an interesting thing when people. Last year I invited a bunch of high schoolers from Young Life. They loved it, had like the time of their lives, but at the end they were like, I had no idea what you were inviting me to. But I thought I was just coming over for a party. This is like a party at a whole different level. We start very early in the day. Just talk louder without the mic. That's true. We start early in the day. I think we invite, like, you guys probably remember, somewhere we say like, if you're like our real friends, you'll show up early and help us set it all up. It's kind of what we frame it as, but people come at 5 to 11 with the intention that like, and we learned this from the priors, is basically people gather, they hang out. At some point, we'll then kick off. I ask the 7 questions, which I don't have my script in front of me, but it's basically like, I found a holiday. What is this weird holiday called Sukkot? What does it mean? And you ask these progressive questions that basically form this liturgy in them. And so that kind of starts the evening out, and then we will
eat dinner. Then we eat dinner.
then we eat dinner, and it kind of at 9 o'clock, actually it's the past couple of years we started it earlier because we've had a lot of young kids. We'll gather, I don't know if we had a picture, but like we gather with this year we did this huge fire. It's kind of cool. It's like 3 fire pits across thing. So this is after dinner, when you think 7:30, and I kind of share, and I have a couple other fathers that will help us lead the community they help me share just a couple different things. And so we kind of frame the story of Sukkot this year with Tyler and Zechariah and like just mini teaching. And then kids go play, have dessert.
No, I did the open mic.
Sorry. This is why I started.
I know, I should have said. Then we open the mic up for anyone to share how they've seen God's faithfulness, what they're looking forward to, and then kingdom to come, just anything around the night. And it was really cool to hear kids share and adults share and hear all the thoughts. So, and then after that, we just hang out till people want to leave.
I think that's that's something that we've kind of worked on over the years of like, people want to share. People want to talk about the testimonies of where God has shown up, but we don't often, a lot of people don't have sometimes it's courage, sometimes it's like, they don't want to intrude. And so it's like, by really setting the table to allow for people to kind of settle in and be like, no, the next 45 minutes, we just want open mic storytelling. One year we actually had a mic. I don't know if we had a mic last year. We did actually, so we passed the actual mic. But it's awesome to see just people, they tell these incredible stories of God's faithfulness. And it's like, you're just this reminder, like it's coming. Everything we believe in is real. Everything. So,
have you had success bringing grandparents into these celebrations? And if so, do you have any tips or tricks beyond inviting them in and they awkwardly engage for an evening and that's kind of it?
Yeah. We've celebrated these with grandparents on both sides, with my family and with Katie's family. And we have found that with our family, and each family is unique, but our families actually really have enjoyed them and see the value. They look forward to them. And then I think there is, part of me has this desire that I would love to see, like maybe my parents take more of a lead in it. But I also know that they are allowing us to kind of create this thing for our family. And so it's like this delicate dance back and forth of who's going to kind of take charge. And so what I found is I'm like, hey, Dad, I would love it if you read this, So like printing out something on the script and be like, we'll get the grandkids around you. And then if you can read this, that would be really helpful. And so it feels like there's a facilitator, but like he can take some parts and lead them. And so that's been helpful for us as we've kind of embraced the generation, before us in these traditions. Anything you'd say?
Yeah. The script has been helpful for us with the Seder meal, especially. We cut it out. Jordan Stone created this thing, the Seder remake, a long time ago, and it's like 12 parts, and everybody has their own. So we pass it out. So we try to set people up with a part to be engaged. But we kind of have I'd say we both have lost a parent in the past decade or so, and so it's like it's hard to do, and I think this challenge of every one of us has that longing that the previous generation would kind of lead in this. But I think at least my mom especially, she gets swept up in it, and I think she's super supportive of it. But it's having a real simple, actionable, so simple, like you said, is great.
What feast got the least traction with our kids? Well, I would probably say Passover would be the one that I come to think of. I mean, we still have fun.
They love the handcuffs.
Enough of the handcuffs.
It's really one of the highlights of that day for them, though, truly.
Yeah.
And like we mentioned a couple times, and it's one that I feel like, let's tinker with this. Let's see how we can get this more memorable. So that's why we put those Passover baskets together, and why I'm like, okay, next year I think I'm going to make that banner a little bit more consolidated because it's a long time to sit. So, I think it is one that it's a lot more listen and then do a tiny activity on this plate, and one that has less fun to it. And that's okay too. I mean, you can't go huge on all of these. That could be really overwhelming. And so it's okay to have some that are more subtle, but that's definitely the one that when we were asking all of our kids, it was unanimously Sukkot. then a lot about Shavuot and the color wars. Nobody mentioned Passover, so I'll just say that. But
yeah, and honestly, like I touched on that we do gyros. Even the menu itself has kind of evolved in order to be like, this is something that they look forward to, because the roast lamb wasn't their favorite, but like eating a gyro, they really do enjoy. And we always end with a celebration, so we have a good dessert at the end. So that is one of the things that they do look forward to. But yeah, that one's taken a little bit more traction just based off of the nature of it.
Well, friends, thanks for listening to today's episode. If you'd like to learn more about 1,000 Houses or discover what a season of coaching might look like for you and your household, visit 1kh.org. We'll see you for the next episode.